Thank you all for joining our meeting. Thank you, Mark. So we are recording the meeting. We got that verbal reminder there. And that's mainly so that we can post the meeting online afterwards at guidinggolden.com for anyone who wants to go back and look at anything, or if they were unable to join us this evening. This is the fourth open house for the US 6 and Heritage Road Interchange Design Project. Thank you all for joining us. I see a lot of familiar faces. We see some new folks as well. And we want to be respectful of your time. So we're going to do our best to keep this to about an hour and a half. There'll be a combination of some Mentimeter questions. If you've joined one of our previous meetings, you're probably familiar with those. We're going to use that mainly for some demographic information this evening to understand how well this group does or does not represent the larger Golden population. We'll be supplementing input that we received this evening with online exercises at Guiding Golden. So we'll ensure that we do get a good cross section of the community. But then we're going to be presenting a lot of really great information, advancements in the design. You'll see a lot of different visualizations and renderings, and we'll have a chance for you all to provide input and feedback on those. But with that, I guess I should introduce myself. Jay Rankins, MIG, and we are a planning and design firm. We're a member of the Muller design team for this effort, and working closely with the City of Golden and other project partners on creating the very best interchange treatment that we can for the City of Golden. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Dan Hartman.
Thank you, Jake. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, welcome everyone. We have a handful of people from the design team available tonight. You will hear from me, you will hear from Ann Byerly, you will hear our Joe Perr, our city engineer, is here, Nancy Lamberson, who's head of the Muller team doing the design, and Jay, who you just heard from. You will hear from Paul Kuhn, who will work you through an awful lot of the amenities that are associated with the options for the pedestrian bicycle multimodal connection. So if we could move on. So project background, Ann will give you a summary from open house number 3. Then we have our Mentimeter questions, which are important. That gives us really good information as the design team. You will look at landscape concepts. You will look at the multimodal deck concepts, art amenities, and then we'll talk about where we go from here. I'm going to be very quick with project background. I think most people are very aware that this has been a many year project for the Golden Plan and the US 693 corridor. Briefly, we had all kinds of back and forth, but in 2013, Council updated the Golden Plan that you see on the screen, and we signed a memorandum of understanding with CDOT. As part of that, there were different pieces to this project, the first being US 6 and 19th Street, which we completed a few years back. This is the second part of that. And one of the things to keep in mind as you look through this, one of the goals of the Golden Plan and one of the reasons we had such difficulty with the region putting a major highway through Golden is noise as one part of it, but also these roads can become a huge barrier between different parts of the city. And I think what you will see tonight is reflective of the design team's effort to remove US 6 as a barrier to the public coming and going. And by remove, just like 19th, we don't want you to walk across a 10-foot pedestrian bridge with traffic and trucks and all kinds of noise and say, well, okay, I went from one side to the other. You still experience the barrier, and the deal we made and the arrangement we came to with CDOT is that the barrier part of the road, we will endeavor to remove as much as reasonably possible when we build the intersections that are shown to be connecting points. So that is a history. The project runs from where the US 6 meets the ramps that come down from 470, goes through Heritage Road and Jefferson County Parkway, and then it actually goes down to the lower point in 6th Avenue before you go up to 19th Street, where the Kinney Run trail comes under US 6. At that point, we've added as part of this project, a project that CDOT was working on to add a wildlife crossing at that point. So that is kind of the limits. Actually, we'll go up to Warner Road and we'll go down to Indiana along the Heritage Jeffco Parkway. So I think that's all the background I want to give you. I'd like to save your time for other things. So at this point, I will say quickly, we've been working our way through. We are now at open house number 4, and this is the one where you get to really dig in and give us feedback on the amenity part of the project. From there, we will probably go quiet for a while as they go into serious design with all of the details that I'm pretty sure you don't care that much about. So if I'm done with my slides now, I'm going to turn it over to Ann.
Good evening, everyone. I wanted to just really briefly talk about what we learned in our last open house. If you'll recall, the last open house had a focus on multimodal movements across the intersection and what everyone wanted in the context of non-vehicle motor vehicle transportation. 78% of the attendees use the interchange daily or weekly, but interestingly enough, we had a much larger percentage of people, 38%, who use the interchange either jogging or biking through the interchange, which was exactly the right group we wanted for the questions that we had. Next slide. We presented 3 multimodal alternatives. The purple one, you may remember, or had kind of the spider look to it. It was a stacked deck over the over Heritage. We had the brown alternative, which was a bridge structure over Heritage and US 6, kind of a more traditional pedestrian movement. And then we had the blue alternative, which was a great alternative that set a second bridge next to the road bridge and had very little grade difference and the need to go under the Heritage, the ramps onto and off of Heritage Road. Next, please. I'm not going to go over all of the responses that we got, and if you are interested, they are all posted on Guiding Golden. You can get into the minutia of the information we got back, but on a very high level, the blue alternative with the second bridge structure was far and away the most popular option. And of note, almost 90% of the people either liked it or had only 1 or 2 concerns, and no people indicated that they didn't like it when they were talking about it for access, for walking, jogging, or using a wheelchair to get across it. Those are pretty spectacular numbers. When we started talking about bikes, scooters, and skateboards, we dropped a little bit, and there were some people that had concerns, likely because of the underpasses and tunnels, but we still had 86% of the respondents view the option favorably. That was considerably better than the other alternatives that we looked at that kind of peaked in the mid-60s. Next, please. We asked 2 questions about strengths and weaknesses. And the weaknesses of this alternative, really what stood out to us was tunnels. Concern about tunnel safety, concern about darkness, concern about, we had some conversations about homelessness. And so we are in tune to that as we move forward with the design. But that clearly, there were lots of other little things, but the tunnels really stood out. On the plus side, there were lots of notable strengths for this alternative, particularly that it was an at-grade crossing and that it was simple. And that there was real good separation between bikes, peds, and bikes and pedestrians, not bikes from pedestrians and vehicular traffic. We really heard that people were wanting there to be no points of conflict between those different modes of travel. So that's where we landed. We had other really nice feedback, at least from a team's perspective. We asked if people had enough information to rank the options that we provided, and really got strong confirmation that people felt comfortable at least ranking them compared to each other. And the results of that ranking are on the next slide. And as I said, the blue option, this offset lid, was far and away the first choice. And so as we move forward tonight, we'll be looking at it from the context of how do we apply that to the blue alternative with the offset lid. And thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say and thinks about tonight. And I'm hoping you like our new interactive process.
Great. Thank you so much, Ian. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're going to use Mentimeter. It's menti.com. So the best way to access this is probably with a mobile phone, a smartphone, or a tablet, but you can also open a second browser and navigate there that way as well. So it's www.menti.com, and then the code is up at the top of the screen there as well. It's 43225939. Again, 43225939. And we're just going to ask a couple of quick questions. And then just to point out again, I will be asking similar questions on guiding Golden, as well as having all the materials available. And that will be available through October 27th. So if you know family, friends, neighbors that you think you would be interested in this project, or maybe you just want to give them the information and hope that they're interested, they would have until October 27th to give that feedback. All right. So the first question is, how long have you lived in Golden? This has been an interesting one. We've been asking the same set of questions about our attendees at each of our meetings. And it's always interesting to see the makeup here. So far we have very few people who've only been in Golden for a short amount of time. I'm seeing 2 so far. 3 we have now. 4 in the 6 to 10 years, 5 or 6 now, 11 to 20. And actually our largest portion are people who've been here for 20 years or longer. Wow. And then we do have a couple of people who do not live in Golden, but live in Jefferson County, who are in attendance as well. So we have, let's see, about 54 attendees. We're at 27 right now. So on this first question, we'll just give it a little bit longer to see if we get a few more respondents. So we'll give it just about maybe 30 seconds to a minute, and then we'll advance to the next one. So even more people in that longer range, 11 to 20 years or 20 years or longer. 17 of our 28 respondents. All right, it's not looking like we're getting more right now, so let's advance to the next one. All right, if you do live in Golden, what neighborhood do you live in? Stonebridge is the largest here. This is a word cloud for anyone new to that. Basically, the larger the word, the more times it is being responded with. So the most representation that we're seeing so far is Stonebridge, but followed relatively closely by Heritage Dells, Eagle Ridge, Golden Ridge, then Lakota Hills, Mesa Meadows, and then quite a few others. Stonebridge in Eagle Ridge, someone said, Eagle Ridge, Trip Ranch, North Golden, 12th Street Historic District. The Menti code is right at the top of the screen. It is 43225939. Thank you, Claire. All right, yeah, so we did get a few more respondents on this one. So it's for those, it looks like David at least was about to log in, so we'll give him a second. Such a helpful bunch, giving each other code here. All right, if you can advance again. All right, the next question is how often do you pass through the US 6 and Heritage Road interchange? So a lot of people have responded already. Looks like we have a few more to go, but most people in attendance, well over half at this point, are daily, one or more times per day. We have several times per week, approximately once per week for a couple of people, and then one person the 1 to 3 times per month range. All right, and we're up to 31 now, which I think is everyone who's participating in the Mentimeter. So we can go on to the next question. All right, how do you move through the US 6 and Heritage Road interchange most often? And you can select all that apply on this one. So before hitting enter, you can select a bunch and then hit enter. So it looks like driving a car is the most common. That's not too surprising. It's a pretty, it is a highway, in fact. But we do have walkers, bikers, joggers, and then some folks who are riding in the car too. So it looks like walking, biking, and riding in the car are about the same in the 7 to 10 range, and then 4 people jogging or running. And at this point, nobody is indicating electric scooter or a balance scooter, wheelchair or assistive device, riding transit or other. I would guess, I hope, that with the design and the implementation, that some of those numbers would increase, particularly on the left-hand side of that graph. So we're at 32 now. Great. So we had one more person join. Joan said in the chat that walking is scary in its current structure. Yeah, I think that's why I mentioned that hopefully the numbers would increase. It's not the best environment to walk, jog, bike, or use one of these other assistive devices. All right, next slide. Great. So with that, we have covered our demographic questions. We'll go back to the presentation. Again, just a reminder, this will be available on guidinggolden.com. I'll probably say it at least 3 more times throughout the meeting. My apologies, but I just want to make sure everyone knows that. And we can go to the next slide. All right, now I'm going to introduce Paul Kuhn. Dan mentioned him. He is a senior landscape architect and senior project manager at MIG, and fantastic person to kick us off here. Take it away, Paul.
Thanks, Jay. So this is where we talk about all of the attractive things in the corridor, if I put my landscape architect hat on, excuse me. And the first part is the corridor landscape. And in the earlier meetings, we asked people about their preferences, and we gave them options of kind of traditional landscapes versus naturalized, and formal versus informal. And as with the blue option here, it was very strong preferences. 89% would like naturalized landscapes and informal planting. So that's good because that's consistent with CDOT's goals for the character of the landscape in their right-of-ways, and everything aligns very well for us to move forward. Next, please. This gives you a view of the project corridor, pretty close to what Dan Hartman showed you. And it's 4,000 feet long from end to end. So it's a large area. And you can see we have a lot of Jefferson County uses. The campus is on the north side, what we'll call Golden North here. North is slightly angled, but for our purposes, it's the Jefferson County side of the world. Centura on the southwest corner, and then the retail complex on the southeast corner. One of the goals for this landscape is to enhance the pedestrian experience along the regional US 6 trail. It's really a pretty nice experience right now, but we think there's opportunities to add evergreen trees to frame views, maybe blocks and views that aren't as attractive, and use shade trees to provide shade and places to stop along the path if people want to take a water break, things like that. We want to make sure that experience is as pleasant as it can be. The other thing we're going to have to do is work with Jefferson County. As most of you are familiar with the intersection, they have some wonderful evergreen tree plantings around their entry monuments for the campus. Some of those will be impacted by construction. We're making a big project here, and it's going to, in order to create the overpass and lower the highway, some trees will be impacted. So we'll work with Jefferson County to see how they want to replicate that, how they want to repeat that for this revised landscape. We at MIG think there's an opportunity to replicate a lot of evergreen trees there. You can see by the 2 yellow asterisks, that's about where those landscape elements would happen. The other thing about the landscape for this corridor is we want to be consistent with what you see on US 6 and 19. That landscape had established a character, and we're going to repeat that in this next version. We also, Chad, I think we skipped some slides here. Oh yeah, multimodal, sorry. So we're going to go into the multimodal deck and talk about that, but I want to talk about the larger context first. Once again, a bit of orientation. A lot of our views are going to be from this. We have the Jefferson County complex on the jet. Can you back up one, Chad? Jefferson County complex on the north side, the Centura and the retail on the south side, the Heritage Road Bridge you see in this view, and then what we'll call the multimodal deck off to the left or west, and then we also have the 3 underpasses that Jay mentioned. That we've got the underpass under the westbound off ramp and the westbound on ramp, and then the underpass and the other yellow rectangle on the right hand side under Heritage Road. So we'll have 3 underpasses. They're all going to be 20 feet wide, well lit. I've got a good example of how nice that can be later on in the presentation, and we're going to take great pains to make them as pleasant of a space as they can be. Next slide, please. The Heritage Road Bridge, we're not going to really be touching on much tonight. We're going to tell you that obviously the roundabouts will be well landscaped. The bridge structure itself will have decorative pavements. The rails will also be attractive. A lot of that is driven by maintenance requirements. It's also driven by sight lines, and it's driven by crash ratings and safety requirements for the bridge railings. So we don't have as much flexibility in that. I think the safe thing to say is that whatever we decide on for the themes for the multimodal deck to the left, the pedestrian path deck, those architectural details and themes will be repeated on the Heritage Road Bridge. Another aspect of Jefferson County is their monument signage announcing the entry into the campus. Once again, those are probably going to be impacted by construction. We're going to have to replicate those. We have to work with the county to use the existing signage. Do we do new? How do we handle wayfinding now that it's not a standard 4-way intersection and people get off on off ramps? We may do something further to the east or west. All those things are going to need to be resolved with Jefferson County and what the message is and the details. As I mentioned, our focus is going to be primarily on the multimodal deck or pedestrian path deck. This was a sketch that we showed in some of the earlier concepts. Not a lot going on in this, and that was purposeful in the first couple of meetings. In this meeting, we're going to start fleshing out the ideas for that area, and I'd like to get your feedback on the direction we're heading. Next, please. Finally, well, there's 2 more points. One is we have to make sure when we're done that whatever we do is consistent from a corridor standpoint, and primarily for the traffic on US 6. There's a CDOT goal in the city of Golden goal to make sure that this looks like you're going through the city of Golden, and all the, you kind of feel like you're in a place when you're moving down the highway. The landscape sets that for us. We're going to repeat a lot of the detailing and textures and colors and finishes that you see on the retaining walls on either side of the highway. and in the median landscape. A lot of those things will be repeated in this project, so you get a consistent feel as cars move through the corridor. And last for this section, we like to take our design cues from the context, from the community. And this is a good example that we use for US 6 and 19. The column on the left was built in the 30s by the Conservation Corps. And we use that as an inspiration for the pilasters on either side of the 19th Street Bridge, and as a landing point for the golden arch that's over that structure. And it wasn't an exact copy, but at least it's remnant of the theme that was established by that structure. We're going to use precedent images and those type of design inspirations for the concepts we're going to show you. We'll have 4 concepts that we'll be presenting tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to Chad Koletka from our office. Chad?
All right, good evening, y'all. My name is Chad Koletka, and I'm a landscape architect at MIG, and happy to be working with y'all and the rest of the team to bring these concepts to life so we can get it queued up for construction here. So the first concept that we'll show is, we're calling it the open space precedent. So this is a landscape that is reminiscent to a lot of us, very indicative of Golden's open spaces and the trail experience and open space and sky. So the first deck, when you look at the images on the left and the right here, some things that we want to see in the deck. So opportunities for seating, some landform that could be used for free play. On the upper right here, introducing some of that native landscape character, native vegetation into the deck to help blur those edges so it doesn't look so engineered. Introducing native stone and grasses so it feels a little bit more like an open space corridor and ties to the larger trail network. And then looking at the central path down the middle, but then providing some opportunities for exploration and some opportunities to sit off to the side. So here you'll see this is our typical alignment for the sketch in the plan view. So you'll see the roadway going underneath the bridge deck. Up here on the north side, this will be the tunnel where the main path comes through, and then another tunnel here on the south side. So the pedestrian and the bicycle connection is totally separated from the vehicular connections. The bridge deck is about 100 feet wide in all cases. So here you'll see the main path coming down the middle, where it's 16 feet wide for that path. So pretty generous shared use path. So there's space for pedestrians and bicyclists. One of the key things that you'll see here is we're providing an overlook. So we have some outstanding views to the west. So making sure we really capitalize on those and providing a shade structure of some sort with some seating opportunities there. So if you want to stop and enjoy the view, take a phone call, there's opportunities for that. Looking at this little side trail off to the side, providing some seat walls with some picnic tables, something like what you see here. So again, introducing some of that native stone, opportunities for seating, and so forth. Then in the central would be a large berm, which provides a little bit of separation between those two elements. And then lastly, the overlook plaza, again, really trying to elevate those views to the west.
The architectural precedent that we are kind of incorporating into some of the built elements on this open space option, we're taking our cue from the clay mining history in the project area. This is an incinerator chimney, and it's on hole number 1 at Fossil Trace Golf Course. I've hit this with my golf ball before, and it's kind of an interesting remnant from that clay mining history, and we're using that to kind of apply some of the architectural detailing to the underpasses and pilasters. As you can see, it's not an exact copy, but it kind of picks up on the proportions and basic form of that structure. We've got these 2 pilasters or columns flanking the underpass. I want to point out that this is a rendering, and so the underpass looks a little darker here, and obviously as we get into final design, we'll make sure there are plenty of lights. but it is a nice, generous structure at 20 feet wide. It'll be very comfortable to move through and it won't feel constricted at all. And they're not overly long, so it'll be a comfortable space. These columns flank that, and they're supported by landscape, some low retaining walls that tier up into a couple of different levels, some additional detailing, perhaps a little bit of locational signage telling people that they're going by or over US 6. So some of that information is going to be added to these underpasses. Next, please. And so then we take that to the pilaster on the bridge decks for the, and this is going to appear on 2 corners of the Heritage Road Deck bridge and on the pedestrian multimodal deck. Once again, similar structure, City of Golden logo, perhaps Heritage Road on the girders for the bridge. Jefferson County could decide to add a monument sign as part of this. Once again, those all need to be determined. Lots of use of native sandstone and the coins from the chimney on the golf course repeated here to kind of pick up on that historic character. Next, please. And for each one of these concepts, we've got a 3D perspective so you can begin to understand how this will look and feel. One thing I want to point out about the berms in this concept, they serve a second purpose in that they create a sound barrier similar to what you have on 6 and 19. So this space should be quiet compared to the current condition where you're crossing at road level. Some people might travel over this and not really realize they even went on the highway. So that's one of the big advantages of the berm. It's that same native landscaping. You can see the overlook shade structure very well here, and the seating opportunities. Next, please.
All right.
Go ahead, Jay.
Oh, thanks, Paul. So we're going to transition to something that we call graphic recording at this point. We can also show the images that were just shared by Paul and Chad. But to start us off, as we're transitioning to that other screen, we had a couple questions in the chat that, Paul, maybe you can help respond to. So one was from Ina. She said, are sitting and play areas really needed? Why would anybody want to linger right above all the traffic on US 6? And Claire said, yeah, agreed. Seems like the current path is used by people exercising or commuting. So any thoughts on that one, Paul? Or Chad?
That's a good observation. Based on what we saw on US 6 and 19, I think that does happen. Admittedly, there are probably higher numbers of people because of the School of Mines students, but I think this is a bit of a build it, if you build it, they will come type of thing. There might be opportunities to stop and rest and sit in the sun, and we may not see as much use as 6 and 19, but I think if we give those opportunities, I think it will get used by people moving through the corridor.
All right, thanks, Paul. So if you want to keep putting chat or using the chat to provide comments on this first concept, that would be great. We're gonna, if Chad, it looks like Mark is having an issue for a second, sharing his screen. So if you wouldn't mind going back to the 3D perspective. Would that be possible, Chad? Thank you. Okay, so we had another one here. Lon said, no one seems to linger on 19th and 6th. Great, so Paul just responded to that. And Andrea said, I do like the idea of it being heavily landscaped, though. It could provide more safe passage opportunities for elk and deer. Paul or Chad, do you think there's any wildlife benefit of a potential design like this?
Jay, can I jump in?
Yes,
yeah,
please.
Anne, go for it, please.
Our actual goal is to not encourage wildlife to share this space with people. We have some goals to create a grade separated crossing at Kinney's Run where elk and deer will cross and other wildlife would cross under US 6 in a spot that would be specifically designed for them and provide safe passage as opposed to the current grade share at grade crossing that we have between Kinney's Run and US or 19th Street. But No, although the landscaping, I'm sure will.
So we have a recording of this. So then Tom said I'd be really nervous about making that left turn coming off of US 6 onto Heritage Road on the left side of the diagram. And Claire said, one note on sitting in play areas. They encourage children who tend to spill onto paths, which is dangerous for people commuting by bike on the path. Honestly, I would just stay in the street if the path turned into a play area for everyone's safety. And so I didn't miss my meetings. Great. Those are all really good points. And I think, yeah, things for us to consider as a design team. To what extent would these types of spaces be used? Is there delineation of the spaces to discourage that spillover, onto the path? I think, Chad, I don't know if there's anything you want to add here, but the idea of the multiple paths in this particular concept might come into play there.
Yeah, we've seen that on US 6 and 19th, where there are some smaller gravel trails off to the side, and it's typically with cyclists. They may duck off on the side and ride a smaller path that's off the main path. So introducing those kind of opportunities where there's a quick moment of play that isn't designated as a play area, but it provides some sort of opportunity rather than just shooting through at high speed.
Okay, great. And I'm not sure how many more chat or comments will be on this, but it looks like Mark is ready to share his screen. He got over his internet issues. So Mark is recording, so we can see the graphics here. He's going to be recording comments, and then we'll do a little bit of this at the end when we're looking at all the concepts as well. So Ina chimed in and said, I think play and sitting areas can be better used for some additional landscaping. Brett indicated I'm not certain picnic tables would be used or desirable, but perhaps some rock outcropping and natural sitting areas if you're waiting for fellow bike riders. I've definitely been in that situation where you're meeting up and maybe you're meeting on this lid and you're waiting for 5 or 10 minutes. In fact, I think Mark had to wait for me for about 10 minutes because I got a flat tire the last time we rode. So Claire said, heck yeah, giant rocks are beautiful and nice to lean and sit on. Great. And then I don't want to cut this short, so if there's any additional comments or questions, please put them in the chat. Anything Paul or Chad you guys want to say or respond to with regard to any of these?
Yeah, obviously that's the purpose of this meeting, is to hear the comments that you folks have. And we're certainly not locked into providing amenities on the deck. It could be kind of a great space with landscaping and maybe a bench or two. We'll certainly take everything you're saying into consideration. None of these are finished by any stretch of the imagination. These are really our first thoughts. So appreciate all the comments we're getting.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeremy also supported the rocks. He said they're the best. Paul said rocks way too much. And then there's a lot of comments on the rocks here. Rocks make great seating areas, like along the new Park to Platte Trail along the creek. Tom said yes, but look at how the diagram shows arrows painted in the street. I think that is in response to Nancy's clarification. Nancy, do you want to speak to the left turn movements?
Yeah, Tom, that's just a standard practice in the transportation industry as to how we sign or how we stripe roundabouts, but you would also have guide signs showing you which direction to make the turn. So I know it's a little confusing, but trust me, you're going to have to make a direct turn, a left turn from the ramps onto Heritage. They will all be accessed via roundabout. Great,
thank you, Nancy. Alicia said we meet people on the lid on 19th, so she's doing that actively now. She likes the idea of at least some space to wait and relax. Joan said I would prefer landscaping and a few rocks or rock benches to sit on. I wouldn't picnic or play with kids there. And then Laurel said, love the natural landscaping ideas with boulders and native plants. Great, that's really good feedback. Thank you, Laurel. All right, so we got quite a push here. I think when people started seeing Mark recording their comments on this big board, and we'll make sure that this is available on Guiding Golden, so people will see when it's all put together here. So it includes those graphics. Mark's making some notes right on those renderings and then taking notes of some of these ideas that are shared tonight. And I think with that, and feel free to, if you have additional thoughts that come to you on this first concept, feel free to put them in the chat. We will be exporting that at the end of the meeting. We got one more here, from Lon. Lots of evergreens would help year-round on noise reduction. Yeah, so as Paul had pointed out, both the landscaping and the grade separation and berms, in this concept, as well as sort of more of that macro level with the overall design, would definitely help with the noise situation. But again, keep the comments and questions coming. We will be exporting the chat at the end of the meeting, so we'll make sure that gets incorporated into our review of the public input. But with that, if Mark, you want to stop sharing your screen, we'll put the presentation back up and we'll go in with our second option.
And while we're presenting the second option, Mark will continue to record your comments on the graphic board. And so we'll have all of that in place.
Yeah, Paul, do you mind responding to the first? We just got one more question quick, I think, and it's kind of for all the options. Is there enough soil depth to support large evergreen trees?
Large trees, no, but there are smaller varieties of evergreen trees that we planted at US 6 and 19 and also could plant here. We have ways to certainly accommodate that, and I could see also some deciduous trees for shade, but once again, we're not talking about a 65-foot oak. These would be smaller 15 to 20-foot trees, and we can provide 3 to 4 feet of soil within a berm or with even taller berms. Some of the berms on US 6 and 19 are 8 feet tall, and they're actually, the core is filled with styrofoam with 4 feet of soil over the top. And that's what the berms of the trees are planted in. So yes, we can do that, but smaller versions of some of the evergreen trees that we're all familiar with.
Great, thanks, Paul. And then Joan
and
just
certainly
chimed
once
in
we get off the deck, we can go to the standard evergreen trees we're all very familiar with.
Great, thanks, Paul. Yeah, and then Joan just had chimed in and said, yeah, especially with the winds, the smaller trees might be better. So Chad, do you want to lead us off with concept number 2?
Yep, so the second concept we'll be looking at, we're calling it the Lookout Mountain concept. So local landmark that we all love. When we look at this, something that's pretty apparent is these folds within the landscape. So that valley and ridge landscape and the shadow play you start to see from that along that ridge line that changes throughout the day and throughout the seasons. So kind of abstracting that concept a little bit with those folds in the landscape. And again, starting with these photos here on the sides, providing some opportunity for an overlook mound to really capitalize on that view to the west. Some exploration where people are free to go off to the sides if they would like, rather than just blasting through the corridor. Looking at, again, some of our native stone and introducing some of that native geology into it. So this is actually on I-70, but a really iconic image where we see those angular cuts in the roadway, and then that really rich palette of colors that blends through there. So trying to incorporate some of that into the structure of the deck. And we could do that by stacking slabs of stone like this. So it has a little bit of color and texture and really feels more reminiscent of that naturalized landscape. And this is on US 6 and 19, where we have some of those smaller trails off to the side, and people sometimes duck off on their bikes to ride there. So again, just those small moments of play that we can provide for marginal extra cost. So similar plan view here. So the main path would come through the tunnel, opens up onto the deck where we have the 16-foot shared use path. And then the berms here, we would have a series of 4 berms, 5 when you count the overlook. And what we're looking at doing is cutting the sides of those, so you get the same type of geometry and color that you would see on this road cut here, but on a smaller, more pedestrian scale. Again, capitalizing on that overlook opportunity, providing a little bit of shade and seating there to where people can look over the edge towards those views. And then, you know, those little free play opportunities where you could go and climb to the top of the berm for a better overlook. And evergreen trees off to the side landscape. So these areas, this line here represents the edge of the bridge deck where we're on top of the bridge structure, and this line here as well. So beyond that, we can go to full landscape with trees that are full size and planted in the ground. But we do want to be a little bit careful about what we plant on the deck. But we have those opportunities for planting in these berming areas. And then again, the berming, especially on this path here, where we've created this valley, that also helps with sound mitigation.
Well, and as Chad, and one thing I want to mention about the last two options you saw, irrigation is required to grow even the native grasses, at least to get them established, certain irrigation for all of the plant material on the deck itself. And what that then entails is that there's a pretty robust waterproofing system that goes over the structural aspects of the deck and keeps the water from getting into the structure below. Both of that would be common to both this concept and the concept we just showed you previously, the open space concept. So irrigation for establishment of the native grasses, that's got to cut off after 3 to 5 years, and then irrigation for the plant material. Okay. As Chad mentioned, we've got this great cut through Dinosaur Ridge with the geological layers exposed. We're using that as a way of enhancing the underpass. This is probably the more minimalist approach to the underpasses. We're really letting the stands of native grasses kind of feature around the underpass itself, and the sandstone veneer that you see here is laid up in different thicknesses and textures and layers to kind of pick up and suggest that the geological layering you see in many of the cuts throughout Golden in the Valley.
Hey, Paul. Well, this one is up on the screen. There was a question from Jim.
Yep.
Oh.
So Jim,
good. Chad, go ahead.
Good catch. That was my mistake. I think we're at 12 feet on the main paths as they come out. So not 16, but 12.
Great. Thanks, Chad. Yeah, so Jim had asked if the trails are really 16 feet wide, which I think Chad said in there earlier. So clarification, they're 12 feet wide, and then the tunnels would be, or the underpass, excuse me, would be 20 feet wide. Thanks, Paul.
Sure. We wanted to, and within this concept, we're showing the idea of picking up on some of the architectural precedents. Obviously, this is the Jefferson County Administration Building. We like the pattern of the windows, the repeated rectangular patterns that you see in this view, some of the shadowing and things that are incorporated into the architectural treatment for this building. And that can be then taken to the pilaster for the roadway and the pedestrian deck bridge. Once again, a play of different materials, maybe a concrete core with those 3 openings, windows in the top of the core, a steel frame to kind of create that shadowing and repeat the square pattern again. We repeat the layering from the geological elements on a kind of a base unit for this pilaster, and then sandstone walls. This option obviously is a little more modern, and we wanted to make sure that we have different looks for people to choose from and different directions for the way we go. And once again, we've got the wayfinding thing. Do we have signage about Jefferson County or Jefferson County Center or Heritage Road? Once again, all those decisions will be made as we go through the design process and work with Jefferson County. As we go into the rendering, you start to see kind of the scale of the pilasters on either side. You start to get a pretty good idea on how the path is cutting through the 4 folds in the landscape here. This has a much smaller shade structure, a little more compact. You can also start to see this kind of discovery path that winds through here, this alternate route for the kids to take as they go through. And there's ways that we can incorporate art into that. We can incorporate interpretive opportunities. But I certainly know my 5-year-old grandson would not be on the main path. He'd be running on the side path and looking for the discovery elements there, even if we're just moving through the space. And as Chad says, that terminates in that spiral to the top of the overlook on the north side of the deck.
Hey, Paul, there's a couple questions about the dimensions still.
Yep.
One was, is the deck that we're looking at and talking about, this amenity deck with the pedestrian and bike path, is that the same width in all of the concepts we're looking at?
The next concept, it'll be narrower. And just as a matter of scale, US 6 and 19 is about 280 feet wide, so a much larger deck. So for a number of reasons, primarily because we don't have to accommodate a roadway here, this deck is narrower. But obviously when you put the roadway deck and the multimodal deck together, we're about the same scale as we had at US 6 and 19. They're just separated.
Great, thank you, Paul. All right, so then I think we're switching back to our discussion. So there's already a few chats specific to this concept. Someone said that they like the entrance to the tunnel. That was Joan. Ina said that based on the survival rate of the trees on the 19th bridge, more shrubs and grasses versus trees may be a better option for plantings on the structure itself. Paul, I believe you selected the plantings for the 19th bridge. So any comments on that one?
Colorado is a difficult place to grow trees under the best of circumstances. So we'll certainly take that into consideration. And perhaps folks are planting off to the side of the deck. But I think that's a good suggestion and something one of the things we heard in the earlier meetings that people were really interested in shade along the corridor. And so some of that is a reaction to that. I haven't been by the US 6 and 19 deck in a year or so, so it's probably a good time to go do a follow-up review on how the plantings are doing.
Great, thanks, Paul. Laurel indicated that she prefers the historic pilasters in design 1. She said they're beautiful. So more of a comment on design 1, and Paul is blushing now, I think.
Oh, shucks.
All right. So again, we want to give you a chance if there's any more comments or questions on the second design concept. So I think Mark just panned over to concept 1 to add that idea about the historic elements being beautiful. Andrea said, I agree with Laurel. This design isn't as timeless or classic. So that is a sort of a critique of concept 2, it sounds like. The other one blends nicely with the landscape. So that would suggest that this one, as you said, isn't timeless or classic and maybe doesn't blend as well with the landscape. And let's just give it another minute or so, or less, I guess, if we don't see anyone typing.
And the other question on the widths of the decks, 3 of the 4 options are 100 feet wide. And the 4th option is, I believe, 50 feet wide. So we are looking at one narrower option. So we'll discuss that one coming up next.
Great, thanks for the clarification, Chad. All right, so again, keep the chats and questions coming. Mark will be looking at those, adding them to this great board that he's working on. We'll also be exporting the chat, but why don't we stop or switch the sharing and we'll go back to the presentation. It looks like we have one more comment from Eric. Oh, and one from Lon too. So concept 1 looks more golden or westernish. One blends well, but I do like the stonework on the underpass in concept 2. Eric said he appreciates the architecture of the Jeffco Center, but would not favor extending it into the overpass. So it's good where it is. Shane said it looks like the automobile bridge will have issues with space for snow removal, lacking side road space for snow in segments, and the traffic lanes look too narrow to accommodate leaving snow in the lane. Not to mention those lanes don't look sufficient for moving van navigation, so larger vehicles. And Ina agreed with Lon up above about the Jeffco, or no, which one was that? About concept 1 looking more golden or westernish. So Shane, on the comments about the roadway, we'll definitely take those into consideration in design development. And thank you everybody for your comments on concept 2. So Chad, you want to kick us off in concept 3?
All right, so concept number 3, we're calling this the Table Mountain concept. So very recognizable landmark, kind of the crown jewel of Golden that's visible all over town. So one of the things that stands out to us when we look at Table Mountain as that key landmark is you see all of these vertical pillars in the face of the stone and that shadow play that you start to see that's constantly changing throughout the time of day. So how can we start to abstract that into the landscape and take cues from that? So here you see the main path coming through, and this deck we've shortened up to 50 feet wide. So this one would not have the full depth for tree planting. This would be a far more cost-effective option, but in this case, because the bridge is not as thick, we're not able to plant trees on it into the deck structure itself, and everything would have to be raised planters that sort of sit on top of the bridge deck itself. But because it's not as big, it's not as heavy, and it would be a lot more cost-effective. So this one is much simpler in its articulation. The path, instead of doing a meander, really just comes straight down the middle. And we have a little bit of space on the side, and you start to see this sort of push and pull in the planters. So again, playing off of those, what you see with the pillars and the shadow play along Table Mountain, to where it's not a uniform edge, but you have that variation in the depth. So using that variation in both the depth and the height of the planters, providing some opportunities for seating that would be tucked into those planters if people wanted to stop or to meet up on the deck. Providing a much smaller overlook opportunity. So this one would be, rather than a place to hang out, maybe you just duck off and take a photo. And then off to the sides, providing brick or possibly stone, but some sort of softer material that isn't the concrete path that would go down the middle, and just to kind of blend and blur those edges of the landscape. And the planters, we're kind of thinking these could be a Corten steel or some sort of material like that. So very rustic in nature, sort of like you see in these two images here. And this little seating area, a much smaller, more passive area, but some opportunities for seating like you see in this image in the upper right.
And the advantage of this narrower deck is that we're focusing the landscaped areas basically within bathtubs. And those would be tied together in a subdrain system that doesn't introduce water onto the structure itself, other than what falls on it through natural precipitation. So from a design standpoint, the waterproofing would not be near as robust as it would be with the other landscapes that have 18 inches of soil to support the native grasses and perhaps some berms to support shrubs and things like that. Now, certainly we can do the waterproofing and make it work. We've proven that at US 6 and 19, but this is a different approach to it. Go ahead. As Chad mentioned, we've got these vertical geological forms that create this play of shadow and color and texture. This option kind of takes those forms and apply those to the underpass elevation. We're fortunate that we have lots of sandstone here in Colorado that we can use these so thin sandstone slabs stacked vertically to pick up on that Table Mountain geological formation. They may not be quite as varied in color as this, might be more browns and tans to match Table Mountain better. But once again, these could be fronted with a planter wall, a low planter wall that perhaps disappears, and then native landscaping within that. That kind of vertical slab treatment is then repeated for the pilasters for the road decks, the road bridges, the corner treatments. But not using the sandstone in this case. In this case, we pick up on the Corten steel and create those layering and shadowing that Chad mentioned that would change during the day. That's set on a fairly stout sandstone base fronted by another retaining wall and perhaps some rock placements to naturalize things. Once again, picking up on this idea of kind of this pre-rusted weathered steel that it kind of fits within the naturalized landscape, but is something that we can work with to create the concept we're looking at. And as we get into the rendering, you see it start to pull together. One of the things the rendering also illustrates is the idea of using vertical panels on the sides of this deck. Because we can't use berming to in larger plant material to deaden the sound, we would use kind of smaller sound walls that might be 6 to 7 feet tall. Once again, stair step, as Chad mentioned, probably again Corten steel or a painted steel that looks like that. Perhaps there's some laser cutting with leaf patterns or something in the top that may be at eye level, so people can kind of get views as they move through the bridge. But certainly we need to mitigate the sound from the highway with the narrow bridge. The overlook might also have some sort of soundproofing panels. In this case, we're showing clear Lexan panels. Maybe those aren't there. Maybe it's open like all the other structures, and some of the soundproofing walls are behind that overlook area. So this is sort of a different look, and you kind of get a feel or scale of the pilasters in this option, and the approaches to the tunnels.
All right, so let's switch over to Mark's screen here. One question for Paul or Chad, and we've been getting a lot of comments on this one. It's generating a lot of ideas. But Claire had a comment that it didn't look like in the rendering there was as much elevation gain in this one as in the prior concepts. Is there any difference in sort of the grade or going uphill, downhill for the cyclists or pedestrians in any of the options?
Hey Jay, this is Nancy.
Yeah.
Basically, the longitudinal grade on any of the trails and sidewalks will be the same in any of the options. It was probably just an aspect when you're looking at the renderings, but no difference between any of the 3 options.
Okay, thanks, Nancy. That's great. And then jumping back up to when this concept started getting presented, we saw that Claire liked how neat this one looked. I'm assuming just sort of how clean it is. Jeremy said that he thought the raised planters could cook in most of the seasons and nothing will live well in there. I don't know, Paul, what's your experience with that?
These types of planter systems are used on roof decks on tall buildings throughout cities in the US. A lot of them in Denver. Similar approach. Obviously, they're in full sun in urban centers, which are going to be even hotter than here. And it really comes down to the plant material that's selective. And luckily, we're in a climate where we've got a lot of really drought-tolerant plant material available, especially smaller plant material. So we think they should do all right with supplemental irrigation. There's certainly a lot of applications on those in downtown Denver that you don't see unless you work in the building.
Great, thanks, Paul. And Mark is capturing a lot of the comments already, but I'll still read through several of them. So we also saw people thought that the seating should be replaced with boulders. A lot of support for the rocks again here. Ina said it looks very urban, like it belongs downtown. A suggestion to do rocks instead of the planters, not just the seating. Another comment about the heat and the plants. So something we'll definitely take into consideration, but as Paul said, there's a lot of precedent for how to do this right. Joan said the rocks are more xeriscape than the plants. Shane said raised planters can help keep water off the bridge deck and improve the lifespan of the bridge. And he likes the narrower deck and the lower cost associated with that. Hannah said raised planters help mitigate traffic noise. Laurel said agree with Ina about the urban feel, prefer the more natural look from the earlier concepts. Jeremy said not sure about the sound and dampening for the neighborhood. Paul, do you want to just reiterate what you said about the kind of the sound walls and whatnot about the sound here?
Yeah, the best way to mitigate sound is either through a landform or a solid barrier, like the sound walls you see along the highways throughout the Denver metro area. They can be built of a lot of different materials. But if we don't have the room to do the berms like you saw in the previous concept, then some sort of paneling would be appropriate. And yes, they would block some of the views, and maybe we open up those views in spots. But I think when you're in this space, it's really internally focused. And quite frankly, nobody really wants to look down the highway that much anyway. But those are certainly good comments. This space would feel more enclosed and less open than the other two concepts we've shown you. So, but I think if we want to mitigate the sound, we're going to need panels similar to what we've shown here.
Great, thanks, Paul. Andrea said that she loves the tunnel framing. Nathan said that he thought maybe the narrower option would encourage slower bike movements because the peds and bikes need to coexist more in this option. Another hand on the line said the Table Mountain is not sandstone. Lauren said, I would like the planters, possibly alternating them with more rocks. Another fan of the tunnel framing. Someone likes the pilaster design. Another support there, modern but not overly trendy. We're almost caught up here, I think. I'll just try to hit some unique comments. And Mark's doing a great job of capturing all of them. Doesn't look like as much elevation gain. Oh, Nancy clarified that. Did you want to say something, Paul?
Oh, I just knew there would be a geologist in the audience, so. I am a landscape architect, so excuse my mistake on that one.
The pilasters in option 3 just look like giant signs, not a fan. I think the tunnels are a great idea. So general support for the overall concept, it sounds like, no matter how it looks. People prefer rocks to the Corten steel. The tunnel facing, more support. Straight lines encourage bikes to go faster, so maybe curves to slow the bikes. I think those are all. Joan said, and this is in response to a couple of comments about curves kind of slowing folks down, bikes and vehicles, said curves need to be gentle enough that they don't make blind spots. Been about run over on Kinney Run. And then Paul said he likes the more utilitarian aspect of this option. Great. Last one came in from Shane just a minute or two ago. I like the idea of a solid wall on sides of the bridge to inhibit likelihood of board juvies tossing items off the bridge onto traffic below. And Andrea said, I think walls would be an eyesore. So a lot of mixed feelings about those walls. All right, Mark, thank you so much for capturing all those comments in such a cool way. Let's stop that screen share and shift back to the presentation to hear from Chad on concept number 4.
All right, so concept 4 will be the final concept, and this one goes back to the full 100-foot width. So again, looking at some local geologic precedents, what we see up on Dinosaur Ridge, but that layering of the sandstone formations that we see there, you know, that really rich color palette of the reds, the oranges, the browns, and really that vertical layering and stacking that we start to see. So in this concept, we've brought the meander back into the trail, so the curve is back. So this one would go the opposite direction with a smaller side path that comes off to the overlook, so it's a little bit more hidden rather than open. And the key feature here would be these sandstone walls. We wouldn't actually do sandstone. The material that we're looking at here would be shotcrete. So it's a much lighter weight that we could do on a bridge structure, but it can really be sculpted to look and feel like sandstone. So the color matching, the texture would be very reminiscent of sandstone, but we can start to introduce those rich colors of the reds and oranges and the browns into that shotcrete material to sort of mimic those sandstone formations that we see. So beyond the shade structure would be a smaller climbing boulder like you see here in the right. So that could be a centerpiece or a focal element of the deck. People could climb on that, watch the view from the top, but really not a structured play element, but some object that's focal point and provides the opportunity for play. Behind these shotcrete sandstone berms, we have the opportunity to plant trees where we're berming up soil. And again, those would be the smaller trees, but providing some opportunities to introduce kind of a more scrub-like landscape with some smaller trees in there. And then again, on either side of the deck by the tunnels, we have full depth of grade to where we could plant full-size trees and to blend those edges of the tunnel into the landscape.
And once again, we would repeat that sculpted rock treatment that it's glass fiber reinforced concrete. And these folks that do this, you see this a lot in zoos. They can make it look like just about any rock we want to mimic. So we've kind of shown those reds and deep browns here. But once again, those would be layered up in kind of tiered layers, creating pockets for landscaping to kind of pick up on the landscape you see up on Lookout Mountain, where you see plants and things growing out of areas that you can't understand how they can even grow. But we would provide that idea on the deck, but a much more restrained landscape palette and landscape treatment, and more kind of a rock-like finish to the framing of the underpass. And then that is repeated as a base for the pilaster in this option, and the pilaster emerges out of that geological setting with a sandstone base, and then coming up into kind of a lower, more horizontal pilaster. That curve sort of picks up on the golden arch idea in the downtown, just that very gentle form framing either side of the bridges, and then the sandstone veneer, as we, similar to what we've shown in the previous concept. So once again, a different look, a different approach, just trying to get as many options to you as we mentioned. And once again, on the bridge, you'll notice on all of these concepts, the bridge rail, the treatment of the bridge structure itself, all of those things are all shown the same in all the concepts. They will change, and they will pick up on the theming and detailing, whatever the preferred concept ends up being.
Great.
And as we go into the rendering, one thing I want to point out is that if you visualize a sandstone layer that was put across, or a stone of some type, I don't want to get into the geology again, laid across the deck, and the soil was scraped off it, that's basically what you see on either side of the path. There's a sculpted edge, but then there's a flat spot where these pockets for landscaping are created. And it really looks like this is a sandstone layer that's was exposed as this project was constructed and the grading was completed, and left in place and a path notched through it. And each one of these pockets where the plants are would be, once again, a bathtub. That this option, like the previous option, would not require extensive waterproofing of the deck. We can contain the water within the planting areas, and the concrete that lays over the sculpted rock concrete would act as an impervious barrier for the remainder of the space.
All right. Thanks, Paul and Chad. If we want to switch back to Mark's screen, I'll start with a few of the more recent comments. Jeremy said this one just feels better to him. Donna agreed. Alicia said, I love the lower part of the layered rocks, but not the curved top monument part. And then I'll start jumping backwards here. Andrea said that she likes the rock framing in this design, but the manufactured zoo rocks always look bad in her opinion. Any way to execute this framing with real rocks? Laurel loved the plants and rocks in the underpass frame. And then jumping way back, and then we'll catch up here. Lauren said that she thought that this looked more like golden. Paul was wondering if we can mix and match the design elements, like the pillars, but then on the narrower option 3 design. Donna said the nearby Eagle Ridge is actually a continuation of Dinosaur Ridge made of sandstone. Might be good to echo that in the design. Jeremy, picking up on that theme, said it would be great to have informational signage on this one, referring folks to Triceratops Trail or Dinosaur Ridge. Claire said that she likes the suggestion up above of combining concepts, the pillars with concepts 3. Lauren said she likes qualities of all 4 of the concepts then they could work well together. Maybe we'll take we'll get some clarification on that in a second. And then let's see. Laurel said it looks like lower landscape maintenance. Lon said agrees, does feel better, but for the side, except for the side monuments, I think is what he was saying. Ina said like this concept. Plus fewer trees on the bridge, but more shrubs and grasses. Jeremy, north side pilaster in the wrong location. Wouldn't it be on the east side of the bridge? I don't think traffic could see it from below. Any clarification on that, Paul or Chad?
Yeah, we'd have to go back to the plan view to show that. So maybe we'll address that after we're done with comments. We'll go back to the perspective sketch.
Okay, great. Oh, here it is. Mark just panned over to it for you.
The columns are shown on the west side of the pedestrian deck because as somebody mentioned, you can't really see them as you're going under each bridge structure. You see them as you approach. So they're on the west side of the pedestrian deck, and as you are eastbound on the highway, you would see the columns. On the Heritage Road Bridge, the columns are on the east side of that bridge structure, so they are visible to people westbound on US 6, and that's why they're at only at 2 corners of each bridge. We felt that putting them on the inside corners of each bridge, they wouldn't really be noticed because of the short opening between the 2 bridge structures. But that doesn't mean we couldn't put smaller columns in to pick up on the corners of those bridges as well. So we'll make sure we look at that. Thanks, Mark,
Great.
for highlighting that.
Great. Lon agreed with Alicia on the tops of the side monuments. Brett said that he's concerned that the large amount of sculpted fake sandstone would not really look natural or weather naturally. Would the shotcrete material require a lot of maintenance or cost over time? Can Chad or Paul, do you mind responding to that one?
I'd have to, we'd have to kind of, within MIG, we actually have a division that does zoo landscapes, and we'd have to ask them that question. That's a good question. In my head, as I'm getting these comments, I'm thinking maybe the edges that face the path are natural stone, and those are stacked up to create that edge. And then the area behind it is the sculpted concrete, but it's not the full structure. So there might be a hybrid way of doing that incorporates natural stone in the sculpted concrete surface to create that.
Yep, certainly like in option 2, where we had the sandstone slabs that were leaned on an angle, we could use that sort of approach to where we use that to frame up the soil on the backside.
Great, thank you guys. Eric said, love this, and sculpted rock is a great option. Show me creation rock and ship rock instead of the curved pilasters. Laurel said she still prefers the pilasters from option 1. Juan, so the tunnel entrances look the best of all so far in this concept. Shane said, what about narrow bridge with shotcrete rock concept to make the load lighter, reduce water sitting on the bridge deck? Don't see anyone hanging out here, more passing by. Claire liked that idea, afraid of how the shotcrete can look pretty tacky. So a lot of concerns about just kind of that look. Generally liking the concept, but the concern about the look of the shotcrete. I'm racking my brain for a local example where it's done well. Let's see. Natural stones look much better, like the hybrid version of the shotcrete idea from Lon. Alicia said pilasters from option 1 with rocks below from this option. Great, so we're getting a lot of ideas of sort of combining different elements of the different concepts. Pamela said behind the medical building on the corner of Heritage and 6 are shotcrete sculpted retaining walls made to look like rock. Right, so that's one local example there. All right, we'll give it another maybe 30 seconds, see if there's additional comments or questions on concept 4. Claire said she's going to check out that example. Brett said, would tunnel entrances be real sandstone rather than shotcrete since weight is not a factor? Paul or Chad, any thoughts on that one?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Short and sweet.
Great. All right, so again, keep the comments coming, but we are going to switch to a Mentimeter question, one more here. As we're doing that.
And Jay, let me follow up on that sandstone.
Yeah.
Stacking sandstone to make it look like that rock face is a real art, and not all contractors can do it successfully. It's variable thickness of the materials that makes it very challenging. You might get to do something like that. The sculpted concrete actually might work a little better to kind of create that kind of exposed outcrop look. But we can certainly come up with something similar with sandstone blocks. It's just a little more of an art form, and sometimes when you're bidding a project, you can't choose the contractor to do the work. So
great, thanks, Paul. Yeah, Lon said maybe an idea is to combine the pilasters from concept 1 with this particular concept. And then Laurel also said preferring the natural rock to the sculpted or to the shotcrete. And Eric said the Bear Mountain at Denver Zoo is sculpted rock, 100 years old and going strong. That is true. All right, so Mark, if you can stop sharing, I think we're going back to the Mentimeter. All right, so it's the same code. So if you have the Mentimeter up still, it should work for you. Otherwise, you can navigate back there. Again, it's menti.com 43225939. And I'll put that in the chat as well, but it's at the top of the screen if you're not seeing that. Give everyone a second to get there, and then if you want to advance, Chad. All right, so which concept do you prefer? We have 6 options here for you, even though there's only 4 concepts. So concept 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we had would like to combine 2 concepts. I think we could probably interpret that as 2 or more concepts. And then also I'd prefer a different concept, which we have 1 person who responded that way. A lot of people supporting this idea of combining 2 or more concepts. Claire forgot already what Lookout Mountain concept was. Chad, do you mind just describing that verbally a little bit?
Yep, so that was the one with the 4 separate berms that sort of had the discovery trail meandering through it. And then that had the cleaved faces with the big slabs of stone that were stacked on the edges of the berms.
Great. So it's looking like, and Claire said thank you to Chad. It's looking like concept 1 and concept 4 are kind of jumping out as those that people like the most. So that would be that open space concept that we saw first. A lot of support for the pilasters, obviously, in the chat. And then the greatest support really for 18, but it sounds like the greatest concern there is around it really looking and feeling authentic, particularly if we incorporate into that shotcrete. And then quite a few folks, more than actually even supported concept 1, liking this idea of combining 2 or more concepts. We have a few more people responding. It looks like there's a little movement on there, so we'll give this another 30 seconds or so. I think we got up to 32 responses earlier, and I think, oh, we're down a little. A few people have dropped off the call, so we'll give another 30 seconds to see if anyone else chimes in. But again, pretty clear direction. People are liking concept 4, obviously with some noted concerns, liking some aspects of concept 1. And so maybe we'll respond to those 15 people who like the idea of combining 2 concepts, looking at how do we integrate the best of all of those. And we did get up to our 32 here. So I think with that, we can go back to the presentation.
No, one more.
Oh, one more question. I'm sorry.
Is there another one, Chad?
Oh, another Mentimeter.
Yeah.
There is.
Here we go. And some people have started to respond already. If you could combine the two concepts, which concepts would you choose? A lot for 1 and 4. We're seeing 3 and 4, 2 and 4. A couple people typed in, don't try and make it a destination. It's a thoroughfare. People like the idea of concept 1 and 4 with no play area or picnic area. Someone like concept 1 the most, the pilasters in concept 1, but most everything else from 4. I think that was a pretty common sentiment that we were hearing in the chat. Cut cost. This needs to be quick bridge across the road. Don't try and make it a destination again. And I like the natural sandstone rock of concept 4, but the final look using constructed sandstone needs to be done carefully. I think Paul was speaking to that as well. Number 1, but simpler, like number 3. So there's definitely some support for a simpler, more cost-effective structure from some folks. All right, well, and you can keep responding to this, but we'll go back to the presentation now. And Paul, do you want to speak to the art and amenities?
Well, art obviously is going to be, I think, a big part of this project, as it is in any Golden project. And the Public Art Commission, Ann Byerly, has already started the interaction with them to start thinking about this. And there will be some timing considerations on funding. But as we can see by this image, art can take a wide variety of shapes, sculptural, landscape art, kind of more whimsical art. And those choices and decisions that we made from the Art Commission, not only on the type of art, but also the location of art. So they'll be thinking about that, how we integrate those two when this project actually gets constructed. The other part of the art is the underpass themselves, Chad. And I mentioned there's a good example of this is an underpass in CU on the campus between the hill and CU, and you can see how well lit they can be at night. I think this might be 24 feet wide, but once again, the dimensions of the two underpasses are fairly similar. This has art that's actually 3-dimensional and built into the underpass walls. This reduces vandalism, and is obviously more long-lasting than a mural. On the other approach, just integrating small patches of art, once again 3-dimensional, into the bridge structure itself, into the walls, lots of different ways art can be expressed. We also have a lot of things that no matter what concept is chosen, we will be incorporating things like seating opportunities, a lot of support for benches like this. Perhaps maybe elsewhere on the trail, we'll look in more standard benches. They could even be sculptural, as you see here. This is a bridge structure in another part of the country. Go ahead, Chad. If we do end up with overlooks, how those happen, are they, something more basic as we see here, or the use of walls and seat walls? Some of these can be very easily accommodated in a couple of the concepts we've shown. Next, please. And play doesn't have to be your standard play structure. They can be simple sandstone or tree trunk steppers, as you see here, that maybe even is along the path as they go, the little side path that somebody goes into. We could have smaller play events, something more typical here, or it could be storytelling. This is an example of a universally accessible playground up in Fort Collins, where a sleeping giant is part of the storyline here. And here you have to look carefully, but there's a nostril you can see and some lips. This giant's face is half buried in the soil and the playground surfacing, but his toes stick up out of the ground 300 feet away. And some type of storytelling option, maybe with that discovery path that Chad showed on one of the options might be an opportunity. And once again, this would be something that could be worked out with the Art Commission. Next, please. And we heard shade was an option. Shade can be a standard place shade structure like you see on US 6 and 19, or just little small events over a place to sit. Another option is a swing bench. Those are always very popular. We see those in a lot of different places these days, and any of the parks we put those in, they're kind of the top used features. So those are other amenities, and the list is endless. But the point is that we will be looking to incorporate things like this, not just on the deck, and maybe less based on the comments that we heard tonight, but along the whole corridor, and think of ways to make this a pleasant place for people to be in, even if it's only for a few minutes. Dan, I think you're up.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for your comments. It's very helpful to us to combine, move things forward. We will be using the comments that we've got tonight and that we get over the next few weeks on Guiding Golden, and we will use those to try to come up with a final concept that meets most of the desires of the community. As we put that together, then we will have to start doing some more detailed engineering, which will have to do with structure, with weight, with things like drainage, water quality, all kinds of things. When we work our way through that and we get to a point where we feel we are comfortable that what we show you we can actually deliver, we will have another meeting to go back through what the final concept looks like, and you all have one more time to look at it and make suggestions. But it will be important to know at that period of time, we can't do something completely different. We can tweak things pretty easily, especially things around appearance. And at that point in time, we will, the next meeting you will hear after that would be, if we ever get funded for construction, a construction schedule and phasing. So you won't hear a lot in the near future. The work that needs to be done now by the engineers is fairly detailed, and it will take some time. So we may be into the winter or even early spring before we're ready to bring you back additional renderings to look at where we are and get your final input on design. So with that, I think I again want to thank you all for your time tonight. These types of sessions and your comments are very helpful to us to try to put something together that meets as many of the desires as possible. So with that, I would say thank you all. Jay, I'll give you one last word.
All right, thanks. Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone who participated. The quality of the feedback, as always, was off the charts. A lot of great comments on all the concepts, I think all across all of the concepts that we saw. What you can see on the screen there is what Mark has been recording for us. He was zoomed in throughout the rest of the meeting, and now he's zoomed out for us. So we will create a PDF of this that can be uploaded to Guiding Golden, and you'll be able to download this as well as zip around and zoom around like Mark is. But again, just thank you so much. Throughout this entire process, we've been getting a lot of great input and feedback. And hopefully the quality of the design and the responses and refinements, people are seeing that and seeing how this is really a design of and for the community. So thanks and have a great night.